divine order. And it by divine appointment, too. And we're just really, really glad to see all of you here tonight. And I'd like to introduce Sherry Rain. She is the director of our chaplain program, and she's going to lead us in our opening prayer.
All right, so everybody take a breath and settle in. And as we open to the divine, dear beloved Spirit, we call on your presence, being so grateful to travel this time together, each on our own journey of discovery, opening to where the path will take us, knowing it will be full of mystery and surprise, and it will be full of blessings, both recognized and not yet seen. And in that space of an open and loving heart, we bless our guest tonight. We send love to Celia, her baby that's on its way, and her family. And so just take a moment and send this loving energy. And with gratitude, we say thank you, God. And so it is.
Thank you, Sherry. So those electronic devices, please silence them, or at least just, get them, let them take a nap. This is hilarious. With this new configuration of the room, the last thing I thought was that everybody was going to sit on the sides. This is just, those of you who are in the middle, it's just, and as Sherry was saying, we never expect people to do the expected here at SLC. That just can't happen. So, of course, the chaplains will have their healing circle next door right after this wonderful interview that we're going to have with Celia. And so you can just go right over there and continue the beautiful work. And next week, I'm going to do a micro class. And how many people, anybody in this room getting ready to go take the Q this weekend? Okay, and then those of you who've been through it, in talking about the shadow, there's just this tendency to think about the dark side. It's like my shadow side is coming out, and the fangs come out, and the whatever, right? But the truth is we all have really wonderful qualities that also live in the shadow that we don't recognize in ourselves. And so next week, we're going to spend some time looking at the happy parts of our shadow and shining light on our good things. And we'll do things like sitting with someone else and saying what you see in them that you think they may not see in themselves. And so I think it's going to be one of those little micro classes that we blast through a lot of information in a short period of time. So I hope to see you there for that. And then on the 31st of July, it's a fifth Wednesday. Paula has taken those and she turns them into musical extravaganzas. Well, maybe they're not, well, yeah, they are. It's Paula, right? So Renee Jenkins, how many people have been here with Renee? He will be here with his shamanic sounds, and that's like for deepening and accelerating your life path. And his instruments are just amazing. The didgeridoo, the conch shell, the flutes, the whistling water vessels, and there's just so much more. This one will probably go until about 8:30. And the last time he came, we encouraged people to bring blankets and beanbags. He asked that we not do that. What we'll do is we'll take out some rows of chairs so there's a lot of space, but he's asking that everybody come sit in a chair that night. And then Reverend James has a class on July 27th. It's called Liberate Your Life, and that's going to be from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. that Saturday. And he's an amazing teacher, so sign up for that one and come get his wisdom. Celia. How many people know Celia? We talked about doing a formal introduction of her, and it was like, nah. Some of the things that you may or may not know about her, though, when I first met Celia, she had just come in to be part of the sound booth, the audiovisual team. Actually, it was just a sound booth back then. And she was instrumental in helping bring on the PowerPoint project. So a lot of what you see up there had its origins out of her mind. And so she did that for a long time. She's been on our board. She, I believe, had something to do with roller derbies, which I think we'll hear about later. And she is now a contractor for SLC. She does all of our marketing. And all of that is just some of the things that she's doing. And I've never really interviewed 1.5 people before. So Celia, I would just like to welcome you to the platform.
Thank you. Thank you, Sherry, for that wonderful prayer, by the way.
Celia and I have a lot in common, even though we are hundreds of years apart in age. Oh, come on.
No, like, what, 15? I'm being serious. She's like, what, 45?
Yeah, right. Going on, yes. But it's really interesting to have the difference in age and to have quite a few very similar experiences in our lives. And so the first thing I want to ask you is, because we all end up here some way or another, and most of us did not start out in Unity training. So did you start out with any kind of a spiritual background as a kid or as a teenager?
It's interesting because my background is my grandparents were very steadfast in their Southern Baptist belief. And my parents were very much like, you can believe whatever you want, but you're not allowed to be baptized until you're 18, because when I was 15 and a half, we moved to Utah. And if you're familiar with Utah, you kind of walk in and people are like, are you Mormon? Oh, you're not Mormon. You want to come be a Mormon? And so, and then you're 15 and a half, mind you, and dealing with the peer pressure and everything. So, my parents did a very good job, actually, of, saying, this is what your grandparents believe, and this is what other people believe. You have to kind of come up with what you believe. And they were just kind of like, as long as you're a good person, that's all the spirituality you really need. So it was nice, but that's kind of what led to my questions later on, which is when I started wondering, well, what does it actually mean for me as an adult now? Because as a kid, you think you're indestructible and you're never going to die, and then you kind of start facing your own mortality, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, what's happening afterwards? I don't know.
So there must have been a point in your life where you, obviously, because that's why we're here, that things took a turn and you became more serious about your spirituality.
Yeah.
What led to that?
Well, specifically what happened was in January of 2016, my grandfather passed away. And when I was 19, my dad passed away of a heart attack. And that was very hard, but at 19, you're very angry and upset with that kind of loss, and you don't process it. That's when I went to roller derby to deal with my anger management issues. If you're familiar with roller derby, lots of drinking, partying, and beating up chicks. In January of 2016, my grandfather passed away, and it was a very interesting process because I was the first person at the hospital and saw his body, but did not see my grandfather, if you can follow. Like it was almost like I just knew he wasn't there or in the room. And so it was this very abnormal experience for me. And then you deal with the grief afterwards. And the grief was in what you could call a normal sense of grief, of kind of going through the multiple stages and asking questions. And that was where I ended up at the asking questions part of, if his body could be there and he was breathing, but he himself was not there, what does that mean? That was the first question. And then, how could there be so many different paths to this thing that we call God, and there only be the one right and true way? Because I didn't always believe or sign up for all of the things my grandparents told me. I had a major problem with how Southern Baptists typically do not support the LGBTQ community, and I just couldn't understand how we could have this power above us that wouldn't love everyone who is good-natured. It didn't make any sense to me. And then, if you have the Jewish religion believing this and you have, Muslims believing this, how could we have so many different paths? And was really upset with the whole thing. I just couldn't figure it out. And normally I'd have my grandparents to be like, well, it's this one and true way, and you're just going to deal with it, and you'll be fine. But my grandfather was gone. And my grandmother was dealing with the immense amount of loss of her husband. She had this idea that they were both going to go at the same time, that God was going to be that merciful person who let them go at the same time. So I was really depressed, and that's what started the conversation with myself of what is grief really and what happens afterwards.
So is there any correlation to your grandfather dying and going back to the grief of your father dying? Was there a connection there? Were you finishing up something, or was this a whole new level of looking at what the heck's going on?
It's interesting. I don't feel that I've fully, I don't think that you ever fully get over the loss of a parent, period. In this particular circumstance, I have, even still today, struggle with whether or not my dad is still around. And a lot of people will tell me, well, if you don't feel him, it means that he thinks that you're doing a great job and he doesn't need to be around. But I feel that my grandfather is laughing at me every time I do gardening. And so, or some type of hardware thing, like, oh, you should be doing it differently. I went fishing a couple weeks ago, and I could literally feel him being like, you're fishing wrong. And I'm like, how can you fish wrong? But neither here nor there. And so I still struggle with that. And I think that's also been this weird anomaly dealing with my grandfather's passing, is that I'm super at peace with his passing, but it did bring up the question of, well, what happened to my father? There have been moments in my life where I feel that he is around, but, I don't know, Papa has been with me ever since he left. And that's just bizarre to me. I mean, I feel like I should know that my dad is with me. So it brings up those questions.
But yeah, it was your grandfather really became the male role model as you went into adulthood, and so he was the one you knew as an adult, and yeah, I can see that could happen. So you're asking these questions, what happens?
My favorite part of the story. I'm asking these questions, and at the time I was working at UC Davis, and I remember my supervisor was very Christian, and she was also very vocal about the fact that she felt that I should find religion, and specifically Bayside Church in Roseville. And I just, so I would kind of go to work every morning with this mentality of, she's probably going to ask me if I'm going to swing by a church, and I don't really want to. And so at the intersection of Fair Oaks and Howe, I look up at the stop. I'm at the stoplight, and there is this Toyota in front of me, which could have been Leslie Leggio. Now that I know, I don't know who it actually was. But I look up and I see this license plate that says "One God, Many Paths," and I was like, "No, crap! That's what I've been looking for." Oh my gosh! I was like, "What? People believe this? There are multiple ways to God?" I was so confused. And then, of course, what do? I pull out my cell phone while I'm at the stoplight, and I start Googling SLC while I'm not driving. I pulled it up on Google and then put the phone down and then raced the rest of the way to UC Davis so I could pull up the rest of it. But, and then it was just this information download. And what was just so fantastic about it was that not only do I find the website and I'm like, okay, there's this idea that multiple different ways or this, it ultimately leads to the same thing. To me, this is just when you go, okay, someone is telling you something. Literally the week before, Christine Boughton, is that how you say her last name? Yeah, Christine Boughton. She had a talk on, it was Vimeo, was the user face, not YouTube quite yet. She had her talk, When God Calls, Answer. And she was talking about leaving SLC. But the first thing I took from her talk was she asked everyone in this room, is it okay if I share this story with you today? And I had never heard that. Anytime I went to the church out in Davis that my grandparents went to, it was always, here's your story. So it was like almost like nice for someone to ask me, do you want to hear my story that I'm about to share first? That really struck me. And then, taking the little messages that you're getting along the way. So I, mill it over. I watch over a bunch of SLC videos, making sure no one's like too crazy or woo-woo here.
Boy, were you going to be surprised.
I know, right? Seemed okay, right? I'm still here. And so the Sunday that I came, James was talking about your spiritual legacy and path to spirituality. And it was so like the whole, like, I know that we like are all like, we know divine appointment is what we're about to say, but like, it was like, oh my God, this is my divine appointment. I'm supposed to be here. And you're just like, oh, gosh. And I feel like so many people that I've met since have had that experience of just like, this was what put me here. But it was literally like, if I had not looked up at that stoplight, I would have never seen that license plate. I've seen it a few times since, but it's still only been like a few times. It's not like everybody in Sacramento is driving around with a one God many paths license plate. I suspect if we did that, we'd have a lot more people here. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it was just clear as day. Like how can you look at a license plate that tells you exactly what you've been looking for, and then you listen to last Sunday's message, and it's when God calls, answer, and not answer. Like you're being hit with a V8 telling you to have your vegetables in the morning. So anyway.
I'm going to go sit down there and just let you know. So, okay, so you obviously this is exciting, and this is what you're looking for. How did you start making sense of things? What was it that helped you start on that path?
Well, I mean, I do tease staff here a lot about how I came and was like, oh, hey, I can help with PowerPoint, and was like voluntold, great, you're going to be here for a really long time then. But I do have this, and if my husband were here, he could tell you this is true. I have a hard time just doing something once. If I do something and I'm really excited about it, I'm in it. And that's exactly what happened here. Even though I told myself, like, dude, it's totally okay to just show up at a church, give your tithing, and like walk out the door. You don't have to. And the entire time I was here on that Sunday, that's what I was telling myself. But what's fantastic is that since then, like, I continue to see the like weaving of my like tapestry, right? If it wasn't for the work that I had done in the media booth, I wouldn't have met so many great people who wouldn't have helped me in my path to realize that I could open up my own marketing firm, work on like the Q process, for example. And even though I still have spiritual questions, like, what is the afterlife and things like that, I feel so much better knowing that I have some type of grounding, some type of foundation. And a lot of the things that we talk about and we share within our community are things that I was already kind of into. One of the things for me was when I was growing up, we would, my father, excuse me, he worked for United Airlines. And so we kind of bounced around the U.S. We were in Vacaville for a while, then we were in Indiana for a while, and then Utah. And when I was living in Indiana, I started getting into actually learning about Buddhism and a lot of cultural things that were in different countries. And I was really super intrigued by the idea of meditation and Buddhism. And then we moved to Utah, and they had no idea what I was talking about. They put me in advanced placement history because they thought that was the closest thing to Buddhism. I know, right? But it's great because now it's like I see that correlation of this was something that I was naturally interested in, and I'm learning about it, and this is kind of where I was always supposed to be. And it's, whether or not I tease Mormons too, when I lived in Utah, I really gave it a full-hearted try. I went to Young Women's Group and learned everything that they had to give me. I gave my testimony, realized it wasn't the thing for me. But, I went through that process and learned it. And I think it's really fantastic to have a community where we can learn about and celebrate all of these different walks of life. And I think that's where, I struggle with our world today because I feel like people forget that we are all different and there are all these different cultures that we can celebrate, and that everyone's traditions are awesome because it belongs to them, and it should be a staple of positivity. That's really where it comes from. So I think that answered your question. I don't know.
I don't know, but it was really interesting. So, so it sounds like from an early age you were pretty intuitive. It's like you talk about just knowing your grandfather is there without that being all woo-woo and weird for you. So that sounds like that's something that you've always carried? Because that to me, because the way I'm built, that has a real direct bearing on your spirituality or your, yeah.
I think that, and actually funny thing, my mother is here, and so I may have to ask her, but I mean, from an early age, I was very imaginative. And I remember being teased that I had like my own language and my own way of doing things kind of growing up. And I feel like that definitely plays into the intuitiveness, because it's kind of like, instead of being in this reality that you're kind of told you have to be in, I'm kind of in this like other world, which allows me to, kind of look at things differently and creatively. I've always been extremely creative, that's for sure. And so I think that has a lot to do with it, is that I'm more open to something that's different, just because I'm already naturally kind of looking at things very differently. And yeah, I think I came out that way, right? Yeah. I definitely was one that was like on the scene. I'm here. Let's ready to go. Push my brother out of the video camera because I'm the only one. Yeah. That's me.
I'm shocked. I'm so surprised.
Yeah.
So Gary Simmons, the coach for us, told us a story. He said that he was talking about, well, we're integrating younger people into this aging group that we tend to have. And I mean, even when I have to say that when I came into Unity when I was 26, the average, that was in the 70s, the average age of the church was 42 then. So it's not like this is a new thing for Unity, except we've all just gotten older. But anyway, Gary was saying that there was a man in the church who was probably in his early 30s. And he went up to Gary one day and he said, I'm 30 years old, I'm married, and I have 2 children, and I have a mortgage, and you all treat me like I'm a kid. So do you get, I mean, not necessarily from those people, but what is that, we're very different generations, and especially the spirituality is starting to come together. But so, and I love that you come here and you're going, hey, we young people have ideas too, and we go, cool. But so, I mean, I don't know exactly what I'm asking, but I know you're going to bounce off of that, so go.
I know what you're asking. I find myself more frustrated when Gary is here, because I do feel that everyone's like, the millennial in the room over there has ideas, let's talk to her. And then you are literally next to the water cooler with 50 people around you going, so what does the millennial tell you about this church? What do you think? Are you a millennial? And even like, if you remember Becca, the previous communications manager, I mean, she's totally a Gen Xer. She is 10 years older than me, and people still were like, you're a millennial, man. And she was like, no, I'm not. And the problem, and I joke that I'm a closet millennial because I don't like people to go, oh, you're a millennial. I feel that whether or not I had past lives, I'm still diving into that idea. I feel like I'm a very old soul, that I can hang out with you if you're 70, I can hang out with you if you're 5. Like, let's do this, So I do struggle with this idea that I am some person with some crazy insight. But I also struggle with the idea that there are people in the millennial realm that are younger than me who aren't where I'm at socially, and also with work ethic wise. I find myself all the time being like, that dang millennial did not send in the paperwork or something like that. And that's very old school of me. So diving off on a tangent, I know. But what I mean by that is that I do feel when Gary is around that I get pointed at and people are like, you're the millennial, what's your idea? But sometimes it can work to my advantage, because if I'm like, hey, James, I got this idea, I think it's really popular, we should totally do it, he tends to say yes. So I think the real big, as a community as a whole, what we're really facing against is that the younger generation want to go to maybe like yoga or meditation centers and feel like they could totally walk away and it not be like this community that they have to give their birth date to and go to baby showers and things like that. It could be this check in, check out, I'm done. And church or religious communities or just spiritual communities are this place where we become a community. We do all know each other in some way, shape, or form. And there's that pastoral care that comes into it. And that idea for millennials is almost kind of scary, because then it almost means there's like a level of accountability that happens too, of like, oh, I have to make new friends, or I have to remember that person's name, and maybe I just don't want to. So I think that that's more so kind of what we're dealing with. And then also, like, who really wants to wake up at 9 o'clock on a Sunday, even though I do now? Like, just joking. She was not amused. Yeah, that thing.
I mean, yeah, but we do have, I mean, we've got a lot of different generations right now, and it kind of bugs me personally, all of the names that we're calling each other. You know, I mean, because baby boomer can be really cool, and baby boomers can be the ones who run the world. You know, I mean, the reason that we're all dressed differently the way we are right now is because baby boomers said we're not doing dress codes anymore. I mean, and it wasn't easy. You know, so I just find it's like usually when someone is saying that millennial or that baby boomer or that Gen Xer, it's always more of a negative. It's like I'm going to put them in that box. And, you know, I mean, there's about, I think, 40 years between us.
I still doubt that, but
well, at least the chronology says that. But I mean, when we sit and talk, there's no age there at all.
Well, I also don't come in on Sundays and ever think to myself like, oh, that's the baby boomer over there, and that's the Gen X or whatever. Like, and I still don't actually see my friends even ages. Like, I know how old my oldest friend is, but she is a friend and could be 35 for all I know, you know? So it's all in how you carry yourself. And I do think that's kind of the downfall of this conversation that we're having. It's a necessary conversation about the mission-centric ministry and why do we want to bring in the younger crowd so we can stay open, right? But at the same time, right now we are kind of doing a lot of focusing on, well, this is a millennial versus this is a different age. And I personally don't turn around and go, well, you're a baby boomer. I mean, maybe I should start asking that question every time I see somebody. So are you a baby boomer? Are you a Gen Xer? I don't know, but...
But, you know, I mean, for my part, my commitment is to keep the teaching alive. You know, it'd be great, SLC keeps going, but for me, and what I find is no matter what age a person is, this teaching, if it is going to catch people on fire, it caught you on fire. And caught most of you on fire. So bringing this back now, you've started your own business. You're on your way to being a mom and a grandma. Can't leave that part out. So you came in what year did you come?
2016.
16. Okay, just about the same time I started doing Wednesdays. So in those years, what's really changed for you? How has your life? I know some of the material things have expanded, but how are you different? In 10 words or less. Celia.
I was going to say, I'm like, that's a really loaded question. Pregnancy hormones aside, I'm much calmer. There's your answer. I love how you laugh because you know. No, the Q process taught me a lot, you know, and my social interaction has totally improved, you know, and before awkward social interaction where I was just being talked at or I felt like I was just doing the talking, I didn't handle very well, and that that has made me a lot stronger. And yeah, I don't feel that things get to me nearly as easy. And that definitely changed when I got pregnant. But I'm hoping that'll return after George is born.
I think you're doing pretty well, though.
Still
At least you're aware of it. Some people, blunder through and, well, yes, we know that.
increased awareness. Yeah, that would be,
Increased
yes, that my awareness has increased.
Yeah. So where does it take off from here?
That's a good question. I think actually what's really exciting is this idea of being able to rediscover life through my child's eyes. Like I've always loved that when you have a child, you get to rediscover life because they are going to bring in this new idea or new way of looking at something that you would have no idea about. And I have a very delicate balance with George because I'm excited about bringing him up in a spiritual community, but my entire family as a whole have mixed feelings on that idea. Not necessarily negative, but just questioning whether or not they would want that, So it's this new conversation that I have to have with people, and how am I going to introduce him to this, and how are we going to approach these different ideas? And it's weird to think that it's going to be totally different because my grandparents aren't here to have that strong one particular staple that is here. Like my grandmother was the type of person to sneak me a teen Bible behind my mom's back. That's just who she was. And we're not going to have that. So I'm excited at this opportunity to introduce a healthy viewpoint on these different walks of life. And for me, I'm really excited about the opportunity to learn more about those different walks of life through what I'm going to be teaching him. Because I've always believed, too, that to learn something, you have to teach it. It's why I decided to do the Badass class a couple of years ago, was that I really wanted to own my life and feel like I was proud of it. And so by doing that course, it helped me really learn it. I was actually learning it as I was teaching it. And so I think that's what I'm really excited about is this opportunity to learn what spirituality truly means, because I still have lots of questions, because spirituality, religion, the afterlife, what actually is going on, those are all very different topics,
And nobody knows.
No.
We make up a lot of stuff, but nobody really knows.
No.
Unless, does somebody in the audience actually know? I guess I shouldn't say that until we check, right? So when you did the Badass class, and I don't know if there's anyone in the room, but there were some people who really had a hard time with the title of the book. And it was a title of a book. And there were some people who, when we talked about it on Sunday, they were very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Did you do that on purpose?
No. No.
Well,
I mean, for me, the book spoke to me because it was a generational piece. If you read the book, you know that woman who wrote it, Jen Sincero, she was totally writing it in a generational tone. So someone like myself would get it, understand it, and want to read more. And we're going back to the millennial thing. It's totally generational, And it's interesting because now, after going through that class, I realized that the principles that she taught were pulling from a lot of things that in the 70s and 80s, when the unity movement was all hippie, we're pulling from the same thing, and you could see it from all these what would be considered traditional texts that were all being put into this one place, but in a very generational tone. And so when I approached James and Louise about doing the class, it was actually because the first quote in the book is Michael Beckwith, and I can't remember the quote, but she said, spiritual guru and ex-drug user. And I just was like, I knew who he was, but to have someone refer to him like that, I was like, oh, there's a great story behind this. And I just knew instantly that book was going to speak to me generationally, because there was that background story that she was always flipping around. And, James and Louise were totally open to it. They wanted, something different. And so I'm really thankful that they went with it. And I can say that I don't know if I would have gotten to that book as soon without the title. It was one of those things where I'd put on a hold at the Sacramento library. And I had some other spiritual books, but that one in particular it's yellow with badass in huge letters. Like, it's kind of difficult to miss it.
Well, a roller derby queen might really be attracted to that whole idea, right?
Yeah. I may have had a few people throw water bottles at me and call me the C word. So when it comes to badass, we're talking about elementary words. I'm okay with it. I pantsed her granddaughter, and she was mad, and I was like, I'm sorry. But anyway.
So, I mean, okay, there is a difference, I think. We were talking about age differences, but there are generational differences. Okay. Did I just go? Oh, no, I didn't go away. Okay. So there are generational differences. It's like we have generations now that have been raised with electronics and not, and all of that. And those of us who still actually like to talk to each other, looking each other in the eye, and excuse me. And so the language has to change, not because there's anything wrong with what we were doing. It's just that the world that you grow up in is different from ours. There's a movie called The Book of Eli, and it's an extremely violent book, but it's a movie, and it's about Denzel Washington plays a man who is a post-apocalyptic world, and he is taking this book to where it will be safe. And it's the King James Bible, and it's the only one left on the planet. And there are people willing to kill him to get it. Mm. And at one point, this girl is asking him if he remembers from before, and he says yes. And she says, what was it like? And he said, there are people who threw things away that we would kill for now. Mm-hmm. And in some respects, our generations, our circumstances are different. It's like many of us have had grandparents or parents who lived through the Great Depression, right? Mm-hmm. I had a grandmother who wouldn't throw away one rubber band. Mm. Yeah, and then so it comes, and then those of us who grew up in the prosperous 50s, and then those of grew up with the beginning of electronics, and then those who was like, what do you mean you had a phone that was attached to the wall? Right? Yeah. And so part of this is about vocabulary and just about how you think about the same things that we think about. Because we're all thinking about the same stuff. It's the same moon. It's the same sun. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
And so generational, I think, is such a much better way to approach it than naming the generations.
Right, yeah. And that's actually the really interesting thing about the time period that I was born in is that I saw this huge transition. I saw, the cassette tapes turn into CDs, and then I saw telephones turn into mobile, and, I saw that changeover. And so I have this really great opportunity to have been growing up in the era of no electronics and then see the electronics come in. And it has definitely defined how I want to move forward with my own children. And that's kind of how I can see also where that social anxiety that I have has come into play. Because when I was a teenager going through years of difficulties and peer pressure and things like that, I had this opportunity to go run to the computer and stick it in a different world entirely, And we have children now who that's all they know. Literally toddlers walking around with iPads. And I have a very strict rule that if anyone puts an iPad in front of George before he hits like 3, I'm going to throw a conniption fit. Watch, in a year, he's going to be in front of an iPad and be like, don't tell anybody. But I want it to be enriching, at least. But that's the thing, is that these technological advances has taken this social capability of us having these conversations away. It's telling people it's okay to not learn how to deal with somebody who's difficult. And I'm so grateful that I had this opportunity to be able to see it in both lights. I'm such a tech savvy person. I love fixing things, and to know what it's kind of like before that and without it, I think is extremely useful, especially with building my business. Now I can have those difficult conversations and be okay with not being online at 24 hours a day. But there are kids who literally believe that that's like the truth.
Yeah, I was in Costco one day, and there was a 3-year-old sitting in one of the carts, right? Ugh. down in the cart, and he was glued to whatever little electronic device. He wasn't looking around. He wasn't seeing Costco. He was not having that experience at all. And I thought, wow, I live for the Costco experience. And what is he missing, you know?
Oh, I remember my mom teasing me that I had a knack. Every time she would take me to the store, every man, literally old, young, doesn't matter. I'd be like, hi, hi, hi. Like, I just talked and talked and talked and talked and talked and
Did you
talked.
have the good wave?
Did I have a good wave? Yeah, I had a good wave. I also had the habit of locking her out of trucks. I'd lock her out. So, yeah.
Do you think that it's about ready for her to get some of her own? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. Anybody have any questions for Celia? And please raise your hand, and please wait for Jeannie to get to you with the mic, because people online, well, and people in here might not be able to hear you. Go ahead, ask your questions. This should be good. Surely you've got some.
Obviously, I can talk forever, but
All right. Okay, George and Celia, prepare yourselves.
Hi, Celia.
hi, George.
I really miss you not being on the board. I could sit and listen to her for hours, hours. Wouldn't matter what she was saying. I just listened. But I am so honored you're naming your child after me.
Oh, I love it. The full name, you guys are going to love this, is George Winston Gardner Coughlin-Surridge. So it's this 5 names. This poor child has been screwed before he's even here. But there's a long story with that. But anyway.
I just wanted to say, is this on? Okay. Okay. After taking your class, and I wasn't opposed terribly to the title, but I saw where it was needed after taking that class with you. And I'm so appreciative because I learned I have to get off my butt and be, in action. So that was really good.
Thank you.
Also, about the child, I think you have to go and ask the child what the child wants to know. And you'll know that once the child comes. You'll feel that connection.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm so excited for you.
Thank
It's so
you.
true. You learn so much about yourself and the world when you have a child. I have grandchildren, so that was exciting. Mom will have fun too.
She's already volunteering to babysit, so that's helpful.
So, weird question. When you're roller derbying, right?
Yeah.
How did your spirituality change from there to now?
Oh, gosh. Well, I mean, roller derby was during a time where I didn't really have any what I would call spiritual direction in particular. I was pretty okay with just being in my 20s and drinking and partying and having fun. And I also totally was okay with not facing any repercussions from how I acted at the time. And now that is totally different. I'm definitely more aware. I am very cognizant of how I've affected other people. And it's interesting because at the time it was almost like I was totally just, I have my problem, my dad died, I'm really upset and self-centered, And so to look back at it now, I still have actually this calling to go back to roller derby. I would love to, but the purple haze that was then would not be the purple haze that is now. Now I can't do it because I'm pregnant anyway, but, who knows, maybe a few years down the road, that'll be my midlife crisis. So back to roller derby. I always used to joke that roller derby had 2 places. It was either your rebellious stage or it was your midlife crisis. So I could hit it up twice and do it.
But so the thing about having your father die when you're young is, on some level, it seems like, and I had that. We have very similar experiences there. I was 21, and my father had been ill for a while. But it's like there's no place to work that out for someone that age.
No.
Is that? I mean, did you find that too? It's like, the adults get to work it out, but you're just a kid who's lost a parent. Tough.
See,
I
but
mean, I mean, yeah, I mean, that sounds a little cold, but it just seems like there's no way to really work that out because there's no one else hardly anyone else has had that experience too.
that's true. I had a lot of people that I knew very confused at how I was feeling, and a lot of people saying you have anger issues, maybe you should go work that out, and not realizing that there was this huge background behind it. The thing for me that was just kind of made the whole thing really difficult to deal with, exactly what you were talking about, was I had just moved out into my first apartment. My brother was still in high school, and my poor mom was a widow at 43 years old, 42, 43. Can you imagine? Like, now I can't, like, at the time I was just really angry. And so there's a lot of, like, you have to buck up and deal with life. I still have to go back to my job, you know, and then things start moving along, and the rest of the world has gotten back to normal. And other people expect that you would have. You know, a really good example is that my mom has since remarried to a wonderful guy, and I just remember when my grandparents were like, he's wonderful, you guys should get married. I was really offended. I was like, how dare you, you know, talk about my mom marrying anybody else, because I, you know, never had that. They were truly in love, you know. So it is different, you know, when you're that age, because you are just trying to be a normal kid, you know, because you're still a kid until you decide you're an adult. So all of you are still kids if you want to be kids. But you know, that part in your brain that's willing to learn from experiences, become aware of your surroundings, look at yourself in a mirror, you know, that part doesn't develop until well after you've had too many nights in a bar. Just let that linger.
Working out your anger, yeah.
Well, in Utah too, you know, everyone's like, oh, alcohol's bad. You can only get alcohol from like 9 until 5 p.m. in these certain stores. And so when you're 21 and you go to a bar, you're like, I'm drinking. Like, everyone tells me I can't. Let's do it. So I may have had a few too many.
But it is. It's a different kind of circumstance. Other questions?
You mentioned earlier about the younger generation. I'll use that term. You know, and most of the churches are older people, and so the younger generation, such as yourself, could you elaborate a little bit more? Where do they go to find their spirituality? What if someone came up to you and said, I don't want to go to a church full of old people. Where do I go to get my spiritual fix? What would you say?
Well, first thing I would actually tell people is you should seriously check out my crew, because they're pretty chill even though they may look old. So there's actually a really good solid community of about 30, 40-year-olds, you know, that are here. Plus our media team is very young. And so it is possible to find younger people in this facility. So I would actually answer that way. But if someone was totally not turned on by that idea, you know, the internet has lots of different options for people to look into. What's great about live streaming these days is that you can watch almost any community online or just videos, but also meditation and yoga centers. That's why they're really popular right now and not struggling, whereas spiritual communities with Sunday services are struggling, because that's like, this is the big scary thing, where that's the thing that I can go have coffee afterwards, you know, and go do yoga with goats or something like that. That's popular these days. So maybe we should have goat yoga. Maybe that's what we should do.
And yet, you know, when we see younger people come through here, their eyes light up and they like it here.
They do.
But it's that breaking the...
You have to break that barrier,
yeah,
for sure. If I had not been looking for it and had literally the words spelled out for me, I don't know how soon. I think that it would have eventually happened, you know? But that was literal, like, one God, many paths. I'm right here in between two red lights. Like, yeah, anyway.
I have a question for you. So you've started your own business, and that's just amazing. You know, it takes a great deal of courage, and you know, I just don't know that I would have ever been willing to walk away from a job and just jump into something like that. And so maybe we're not looking to start a new career, but there's something that we're wanting to try or experiment with, but maybe we're afraid to try something new. What advice would you give to somebody?
I have used the question of, well, what if not? What if, what is the worst that could happen? I could get a no or something like this. I keep thinking about whenever my life comes to an end, will I be able to look back and say, you did all the hard things, or you tried at least? And in this particular instance, it was a very difficult decision because, I was getting paid well, I had benefits, and if you want to have a kid, you might want to have those. But at the same time, I was just like, what happens if I don't? What is going to be the other side of this coin? And I also have very much subscribed to that the universe will supply me with whatever I need. And that's been very scary, to relinquish that power over to the universe. And you can call it God, Allah, however you want to. The universe is how I refer to the higher power. I feel like we also, in regular everyday, like, oh, I'm not going to do that because someone might think that I'm silly, or the answer is just going to be no. Well, what if there is that 1% chance that the universe answer is actually yes? Well, I want to take advantage of that.
Penny, I got it. So as you said that you being our new almost full-time marketer, actually Modern Roots, which is actually, I don't know if people know this, but it's Mary.
My mom is my
part
business
of her
partner.
business partners. So thank you, Mom, for helping her with that venture. But I have to tell you, I've held this for a while because I've heard your license plate topic for a while, and because of honor of you and George, I really think you need to have and drive around town with your own Spiritual
you.
Life Center license plate.
love it.
I have been
love sharing.
keeping that for a while, just for this night.
I love it. Thank you. I'm so excited.
I just want to make one comment about starting your own business and giving up the benefits. Those benefits are prison chains. They just tie us down and take away all our freedom. Until you know that you are totally capable of handling whatever comes up. And there is true freedom. And you have chosen to do that, so thank you
Thank you.
for that example.
I'm also very thankful of my husband, who has a stable job as well, that I could use his benefits. But yes. I mean, anything could happen to his job at any point in time, too. He has a fantastic job in a new industry, the cannabis industry. And we all know that while that's absolutely wonderful and seems stable, it could fold at any moment in time right now. So it's wherever you are, it could be very scary. Yeah, exactly. You could just choose that the universe has your back.
We have time for one more question. Bill. Well, you. Okay, then, Celia, thank you so much for coming up here and doing this with me.
Thank you. I love sharing the story. Thank you.
Pardon?
I love sharing this story. And I love this. I'm like,
Yeah.
someone have a screwdriver. Oh, I don't have my car with me. I'd be like, let's do it right now.
And I don't know, there's this connection that you and I have always had. And it's been just such an honor to be up here with you tonight.
I'm
Thank
sure,
you.
man. I got you, babe.
Oh, come on. Please don't make me be Sunny.
I am shorter than you, so I guess I am Sunny.
Well, maybe we could just be us.
Yeah. There we go.
Okay.
And on
Thank
that
you.
note.
Thank you, Celia.
Thank you.
You can sit up here. You can go down there during the love offering, whichever makes you two happiest. December?
Actually, December 3rd, my birthday. My
all the
mother was
women,
born on her mom's birthday, so I think it was my grandmother giving me a nod. So, fingers crossed.
Okay, thank you. And so this is why we share. This is why we have love offerings, to help keep all of this, in action. And we know that as we circulate, it circulates back to us and back out again. And circulation is a very healthy thing, as we all know, because it keeps us upright. So let us take our love offering. Oh, come on. I've been spending time with Celia. Let us do our love offering blessing together. Divine love, as me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, and all that I circulate. Thank you, God. And let's stand and get connected as we can get connected.